The doctor's words hung in the parlor like smoke from a dying fire, suffocating Helena Reynolds as she sat rigid in the velvet chair. Her hands clenched so tight her knuckles had gone white. "I am sorry, Miss Reynolds, but the fever you suffered 3 years ago left scarring that makes conception impossible." She had known, somewhere deep in her bones, but hearing it spoken aloud made it real in a way that threatened to crack her chest open. Her fiancé, Thomas Whitmore, had been standing by the window when Dr. Harrison delivered the news, and the silence that followed stretched so long Helena thought she might scream just to break it. When Thomas finally turned around, his face was carefully blank, the kind of expression men wore when they were about to say something that would change everything. "I cannot marry a woman who cannot give me children, Helena. My family expects heirs. I am sorry, but this engagement is over." He had left her father's house in Laredo, Texas, without another word, and Helena had sat in that chair for an hour afterward, too numb to cry, too broken to move. That had been 2 weeks ago, in the spring of 1882, and the news had spread through Laredo like wildfire, despite her father's attempts at discretion. Women whispered behind their fans at church. Men looked at her with pity she did not want, and Helena felt herself becoming invisible, a ghost haunting her own life. At 23 years old, she had believed her future was settled, that she would marry Thomas and make a home and be content if not deliriously happy. Now she had nothing but the weight of her father's disappointment and the knowledge that no man in Laredo would have her. Her father, Judge William Reynolds, had been kind but practical when he sat her down in his study 3 days after Thomas left. "You need to leave Laredo, Helena. The talk will not die down, and you deserve a fresh start somewhere people do not know your situation." He had arranged for her to travel to his sister's ranch outside of town, a sprawling property that bordered the wilder territories, where civilized society had less of a stranglehold. Aunt Margaret had always been different from the rest of the Reynolds family, more interested in cattle and land than propriety and gossip, and Helena hoped that difference might extend to her niece. The journey to the ranch took most of a day by wagon, the landscape shifting from the dusty streets of Laredo to open prairie dotted with mesquite and cactus. Helena watched the town disappear behind her with a mixture of relief and grief, grateful to escape the stares but mourning the life she had expected to live. The driver, an older man named Jose who worked for her aunt, did not press her with questions, simply clicked his tongue at the horses and let the silence stretch between them. By the time they arrived at the ranch as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Helena felt hollowed out, empty of everything except a bone-deep exhaustion. The ranch house was larger than she expected, a sprawling structure of wood and stone with a wide porch that wrapped around 3 sides. Aunt Margaret came out to meet them before the wagon had fully stopped, her weathered face breaking into a smile that crinkled the corners of her eyes. "Helena, girl, you look like you have been dragged through hell backwards. Come on, let us get you inside and fed." She pulled Helena into a hug that smelled of sage and horses, and for the first time since Dr. Harrison had spoken those terrible words, Helena felt something loosen in her chest. Her aunt did not coddle her or treat her like something broken, just hauled her trunk inside and showed her to a bedroom with whitewashed walls and a window that looked out over the corrals. Over dinner, Aunt Margaret explained the situation with characteristic bluntness. "Your father told me what happened, and I will say this once so we can be done with it. Any man who would throw you over for something you cannot control is not worth the dirt on your boots. You are welcome here as long as you need, and if you want to stay permanently, I could use another pair of hands. Ranch does not run itself." Helena had nodded, too tired to do more than pick at the beef and beans on her plate, but the words settled into her like warmth from a good fire. That night, she lay in the unfamiliar bed and let herself cry for the first time since Thomas left, great heaving sobs that shook her whole body. When she finally fell asleep near dawn, she dreamed of empty cradles and closed doors. The days that followed fell into a rhythm that was both strange and comforting. Helena woke with the sun, helped Aunt Margaret with breakfast, and then spent the mornings learning the endless tasks that kept a ranch running. She fed chickens, gathered eggs, learned to milk the cow, and discovered that physical work dulled the sharp edges of her grief in a way that sitting in parlors never had. Her hands, which had been soft and carefully tended for Thomas, grew calloused and strong. Her face, which she had protected from the sun with bonnets and parasols, gained color despite her best efforts. She felt herself changing in ways that would have horrified her mother, becoming something rougher and more real than the polished lady she had been trained to be. It was on a Thursday morning, 3 weeks after her arrival, that Helena first heard about Nathan Foster. She had ridden into town with Aunt Margaret to pick up supplies, and while her aunt was at the feed store, Helena had ducked into the general store for thread and fabric. The shopkeeper, Mrs. Chen, was talking with another woman when Helena walked in, their voices low and conspiratorial. 10 children, can you imagine? And him trying to raise them all alone after his wife passed. That oldest boy cannot be more than 12, and the youngest is still in diapers. The other woman made a tusking sound. It is a tragedy, truly. Nathan Foster is a good man, but no man can manage that many children without a wife. He needs to remarry, but what woman would take on that kind of burden? Helena had pretended to be absorbed in examining calico prints, but her ears burned as she listened. 10 children. The number seemed impossible, overwhelming. She found herself wondering what kind of woman would have left 10 children behind, how young she must have been when she died, how the man was managing. When Mrs. Chen finally noticed her and came over to help, Helena bought her thread quickly and left, the conversation rattling around in her head like stones in a can. That evening, over a dinner of roast chicken and potatoes, Helena asked her aunt about Nathan Foster. Aunt Margaret looked up from her plate, her expression thoughtful. Nathan Foster is a good man in a bad situation. His wife Mary died about 6 months ago, birthing their 10th child. The baby survived, but Mary did not, and Nathan has been trying to hold his family together ever since. He has a ranch about 10 miles north of here, runs cattle and breaks horses. From what I hear, he is drowning under the weight of it all. The children need more than he can give them on his own. Helena felt something twist in her chest, an emotion she could not quite name. How old are the children? Aunt Margaret set down her fork, counting on her fingers. Let me see. Samuel is 12, Thomas is 10, William is 9, little Mary is 7, Elizabeth is 6, Joseph is 4. The twins Ruth and Rachel are 3. Then there is 2-year-old James, and the baby Daniel is 6 months old. Nathan had his hands full even before Mary died, but now it is just impossible. I have thought about going over there to help, but I have my own work to keep me busy. That night, Helena could not stop thinking about those 10 children growing up without a mother, about Nathan Foster trying to be both parents at once. She thought about her own empty future, about the children she would never have, and felt the familiar ache of loss. But underneath it was something else, something that felt almost like purpose. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling and wondered if maybe her inability to have children did not have to mean she could never be a mother. The idea took root slowly over the next few days, growing from a small seed of thought into something she could not ignore. She found herself imagining what it would be like to care for those 10 children, to give them the love and attention they must be desperate for. It was foolish, she knew. She did not know Nathan Foster, had never even seen him. He had not advertised for a wife, had not asked for help. But the thought would not leave her alone, and finally, on a sunny Saturday morning, she asked Aunt Margaret to take her to the Foster ranch. Her aunt had given her a long, measuring look over breakfast. "Why do you want to go there, Helena?" She could have lied, could have made up some excuse about Christian charity or curiosity, but her aunt deserved honesty. "I cannot have children of my own, Aunt Margaret. You know that. But those children need a mother, and I need purpose. I do not know if Nathan Foster would even consider me, but I have to at least try." Aunt Margaret had been quiet for a long moment, her weathered hands wrapped around her coffee cup. "It would not be an easy life, Helena. 10 children is a lot for anyone to take on, especially all at once. And Nathan Foster is not some refined gentleman like Thomas Whitmore. He is a rancher, a cowboy, rough around the edges. Are you sure about this?" Helena had met her aunt's eyes steadily. "I have never been more sure of anything in my life. I cannot sit around feeling sorry for myself anymore. Those children need help, and maybe helping them is exactly what I need too." So Aunt Margaret had hitched up the wagon, and they had set out for the Foster ranch with a basket of food as an excuse for the visit. The ride took about an hour, the landscape growing wilder as they traveled north, with more open range and fewer signs of settlement. When they finally turned down the long drive to the Foster property, Helena felt her heart start to pound in her chest. The ranch was clearly struggling. The fences needed mending, the barn door hung crooked on its hinges, and laundry was strung haphazardly across the porch railing. But the house itself was solid, a large 2-story structure that must have been built with a big family in mind. As the wagon pulled up, children seemed to materialize from everywhere. A boy of about 12 came running from the barn. 2 younger boys were climbing down from a tree, and several smaller children poured out of the house like water from a bucket. They all stopped and stared at the wagon with wide, curious eyes, and Helena felt herself being assessed by half a dozen different gazes. The front door opened again, and a man stepped out onto the porch. Nathan Foster was tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that needed cutting and a face that looked like it had forgotten how to smile. He wore dusty work clothes and scuffed boots, and there was a wariness in his dark eyes that spoke of too many burdens carried for too long. He could not have been more than 30, but he moved like a much older man, his shoulders bowed under invisible weight. When he saw Aunt Margaret, some of the tension left his face. "Mrs. Henderson, this is a surprise." Aunt Margaret climbed down from the wagon with the basket. "Hello, Nathan. I brought some food, thought you and the children might appreciate it. This is my niece, Helena Reynolds. She is staying with me for a while." Nathan's eyes shifted to Helena, and she felt pinned by that dark gaze, evaluated and measured in the space of a heartbeat. She lifted her chin and met his eyes directly, refusing to look away first. Something flickered across his face, too quick to read, and then he nodded. "Miss Reynolds, you are welcome. Please come inside. I apologize for the state of things." The inside of the house was chaos. Dishes were piled in the sink, toys and clothes were scattered across every surface, and there was a smell of burned food hanging in the air. A baby was crying somewhere upstairs, and one of the younger children was tugging on Nathan's pant leg, whining about being hungry. Helena watched Nathan's face tighten with stress and exhaustion, saw the way his hands clenched into fists before he forced himself to relax. "Samuel," he called to the oldest boy, "go get Daniel from upstairs and change him, please. Thomas, William, clean up these toys. Mary, can you take the little ones outside for a bit?" The children scattered to obey, though not without dragging their feet and shooting curious glances at Helena. Aunt Margaret set the basket on the cluttered kitchen table and began unpacking bread, cold chicken, and a jar of preserves. "Nathan, you cannot keep going like this. You need help." Nathan's jaw tightened. "I am managing." It was such an obvious lie that Helena almost laughed. Instead, she set down her handbag and began gathering dishes from around the room, stacking them by the sink. "Mr. Foster, where do you keep your dish soap?" He stared at her. "Miss Reynolds, you do not have to do that." She met his eyes again, her voice calm but firm. "I can see that you need help and I am offering it. Now, where is the soap?" For a moment she thought he might argue, his pride clearly warring with his desperation. Then his shoulders sagged and he gestured toward a cupboard. "There, thank you." Helena spent the next 2 hours cleaning the kitchen, while Aunt Margaret entertained the younger children, and Nathan went back to work in the barn. The oldest boy, Samuel, brought the baby downstairs, and Helena found herself holding the 6-month-old while she worked. Daniel perched on her hip as she washed dishes and wiped down surfaces. The baby was beautiful, with his father's dark eyes and a fuzz of brown hair, and he stared at her with solemn curiosity. She found herself talking to him as she worked, nonsense words that made him smile and wave his chubby fists. When the kitchen was finally clean, she moved to the living room, picking up toys and folding the laundry that was piled on every chair. The little girl named Mary, who was 7, followed her around with wide eyes. "Are you going to be our new mama?" The question hit Helena like a fist to the stomach. She set down the shirt she was folding and knelt so she was at the child's eye level. "No, sweetheart. I am just visiting today and helping your papa out a little bit." Mary's face fell, her lower lip trembling. "But we need a mama." "Papa tries, but he does not know how to braid hair or make bread that does not burn, and Daniel cries all the time because he misses mama." Tears were streaming down the little girl's face now, and Helena pulled her into a hug without thinking, her heart breaking for this child and all her siblings. "I know, Mary, I know." She held the little girl until her sobs quieted, smoothing her tangled hair and making soothing sounds. When Mary finally pulled back, wiping her eyes with her sleeve, Helena made a decision. "Would you like me to braid your hair? I am quite good at it." Mary's face lit up, and she nodded eagerly. So Helena sat on the sofa with Mary between her knees, carefully working through the tangles with a comb she found on a side table, and braiding the child's brown hair into 2 neat plaits. By the time she was done, Elizabeth had appeared, and then little Ruth and Rachel, all wanting their hair braided too. Helena worked through each head of hair patiently, listening to the children chatter about their lives, their chores, how much they missed their mother. Nathan came back inside as the sun was starting to set, and he stopped in the doorway of the living room, staring at the scene. Helena was sitting on the floor now, surrounded by children. The 4 girls all had neatly braided hair, the baby was asleep in her lap, and she was reading a story to the younger boys from a battered book someone had dug out. The house was cleaner than it had been in months, and the children looked happier than Nathan had seen them in a long time. His throat tightened with an emotion he could not name, something between gratitude and grief. Aunt Margaret appeared behind him, her voice low. "She has a gift with them, Nathan, and she needs this as much as they do." Nathan looked at the older woman, confused. "What do you mean?" So Aunt Margaret told him, quietly, about Helena's broken engagement, about her inability to have children, about how she had asked to come here specifically because she wanted to help. When she finished, Nathan was staring at Helena with new eyes, seeing not just a lady from town playing at charity, but a woman who was as lost and broken as he was, searching for purpose in the wreckage of her dreams. When it was time to leave, the children clung to Helena, begging her to come back. She promised she would, her eyes suspiciously bright, and then let Aunt Margaret lead her to the wagon. Nathan followed them out, his hands shoved in his pockets. "Miss Reynolds, thank you for your help today. The house has not looked this good in months, and the children were happier than I have seen them in a long time." Helena turned to look at him, and Nathan was struck by the strength he saw in her face, the determination that had not been there when she first arrived. "Mr. Foster, I would like to come back if you would allow it. Not as charity, but because I believe I could be of genuine help to you and your children. I know you do not know me, and you have no reason to trust me, but I am asking you to give me a chance." Nathan studied her for a long moment. She was beautiful, he realized, though not in the delicate way of his late wife. Helena Reynolds had a strength to her, a steadiness that showed in the set of her shoulders and the directness of her gaze. He thought about Mary's tear-stained face, about how the little ones had smiled while getting their hair braided, about how the house had felt less like a disaster and more like a home for the first time in months. "You can come back," he heard himself say. "In fact, if you are serious about helping, you could come every day. I cannot pay you much, but I could give you something for your time." Helena shook her head. "I do not want your money, Mr. Foster. I just want to help your children." Something in Nathan's chest cracked open at those words, and he nodded, not trusting himself to speak. As he watched the wagon disappear down the drive, his children gathered around him on the porch, all talking at once about Miss Helena and how nice she was, and how she had promised to come back. For the first time since Mary died, Nathan let himself hope that maybe, just maybe, things might get better. Helena returned the next morning and every morning after that. She fell into the rhythm of the Foster household, like she had always been there, arriving just after dawn to help with breakfast and staying until the younger children were in bed. She cooked meals that did not burn, taught the older boys to clean up after themselves, played games with the middle children, and rocked the baby to sleep when he fussed. Nathan watched her with a mixture of awe and confusion, unable to understand why this refined lady from town would choose to spend her days in his chaotic, overwhelming household. But as the days turned into weeks, he began to see the change in her. Helena bloomed under the attention of the children, her smile coming more easily, her laughter ringing through the house. She was not playing at being a mother. She was becoming one, and the children responded to her like flowers to rain. They followed her everywhere, competed for her attention, and started calling her Miss Helena with a reverence usually reserved for Sunday school teachers and beloved grandmothers. Nathan found himself watching her more than he should, noticing the way she hummed while she worked, the gentleness of her hands when she tended to scraped knees or hurt feelings, the fierce protectiveness that flared in her eyes when one of the children was upset. He started looking forward to the sound of her wagon coming up the drive each morning, to the way she would smile at him over the children's heads, to the conversations they had in the evening after the house had quieted down. They talked about everything and nothing about his life as a rancher, her life in town, their hopes and fears and dreams that had been shattered. He told her about Mary, about how she had wanted a big family and had gotten her wish at the cost of her life. Helena listened without judgment, her hand resting lightly on his arm, offering comfort without words. One evening, about 6 weeks after Helena had first come to the ranch, Nathan was putting away tools in the barn when he heard shouting from the house. He ran inside to find Elizabeth in tears, Mary trying to comfort her, and Helena kneeling in front of the little girl with a stricken expression. "What happened?" Samuel spoke up from the doorway. "Lizzie said she wanted Miss Helena to be our new mama, and Mary told her that Miss Helena cannot have babies, so Papa would never marry her. Then Lizzie got upset because she said she does not care about new babies. She just wants Miss Helena to stay forever. Nathan's eyes flew to Helena, who was staring at the floor, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. The room had gone silent except for Elizabeth's hiccuping sobs. He crossed to where Helena was kneeling and held out his hand to help her up. When she took it, her fingers were trembling. "Children, go upstairs and get ready for bed. Samuel, help the little ones. I need to talk to Miss Helena alone." The children scattered, though not without sending worried glances over their shoulders. When they were alone, Nathan guided Helena to the sofa and sat beside her. She would not look at him, her hands clenched in her lap. "I am so sorry, Nathan. I never told them about my situation. I do not know how Mary found out." Her voice was thick with unshed tears. Nathan took a deep breath, his heart pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. "Helena, look at me." She raised her eyes slowly, and he saw shame and fear and longing all mixed together in her expression. "What Elizabeth said, about wanting you to be their mother to stay forever. She is not the only one who feels that way. All the children love you. You have brought life back into this house, given them something I could not. They need you. But I cannot give you more children, Nathan. I cannot give you heirs or grow your family. What kind of wife would I be?" Her voice broke on the last word, and Nathan reached out to cup her face in his hands, forcing her to maintain eye contact. "Helena, I have 10 children. 10. I am not looking for more babies. I am looking for a mother for the ones I already have, for a partner to help me raise them and keep this family together. And I am looking for something else too, something I did not expect to find again." He took a shaky breath, his thumbs brushing away the tears on her cheeks. "I am falling in love with you, not because of what you can or cannot give me, but because of who you are. You are strong and kind and fierce, and you love my children like they are your own. That is all I could ever ask for." Helena's eyes went wide, tears spilling over faster now. "Nathan, I cannot ask you to give up the chance for more children just for me." He shook his head, a smile tugging at his lips despite the seriousness of the moment. "You are not asking me to give up anything. You are offering me everything I need. A mother for my children, a partner for myself, a chance at happiness I thought was gone forever. The question is, can you accept what I am offering? A ready-made family of 10 children, a hard life on a struggling ranch, and a man who is doing his best but failing more often than he succeeds." Helena let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob, and threw her arms around his neck. "Yes. Yes, Nathan, I accept. I love your children, and I think I might be falling in love with you too." Nathan pulled her close, burying his face in her hair, and felt something broken inside him start to heal. They stayed like that for a long moment, wrapped in each other's arms until they heard a creak on the stairs and looked up to find all 10 children peeking around the doorway, eyes wide with hope. "Does this mean Miss Helena is going to be our mama?" Elizabeth asked, her voice small and hopeful. Nathan looked at Helena, who nodded, tears streaming down her face but smiling wider than he had ever seen. "Yes, Lizzie. Miss Helena is going to be your mama if you will have her." The children erupted in cheers and came running, piling onto the sofa in a tangle of arms and legs and excited chatter. Helena laughed and cried at the same time, trying to hug all of them at once, and Nathan watched his family come together in a way he had feared would never happen again. They were married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the ranch, with Aunt Margaret standing up for Helena and Samuel serving as Nathan's best man. The children were all part of the wedding, the girls wearing new dresses Helena had sewn, the boys scrubbed clean and wearing their Sunday best. Elizabeth held baby Daniel during the vows, and when the minister pronounced them husband and wife, All 10 children cheered louder than anyone else. The celebration afterward was simple but joyful, with food Aunt Margaret and Helena had prepared, music from a neighbor who played fiddle, and dancing that lasted until well after the sun went down. That night, after the guests had left and the children were finally asleep, Nathan and Helena stood on the porch looking out at their land. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, and she leaned back against his chest, feeling safe and loved in a way she had never experienced before. "Thank you," Nathan murmured against her hair, "for choosing us, for loving my children, for giving me a second chance at happiness." Helena turned in his arms and reached up to cup his face, pulling him down for a kiss that was tender and full of promise. "Thank you for seeing past what I cannot give you and valuing what I can. Thank you for your children, for this life, for choosing me too." The first months of their marriage were an adjustment for everyone. Helena had to learn the rhythms of managing a large household, of balancing the needs of 10 very different children, of being a wife to a man who was still learning to let someone else share his burdens. There were difficult moments, times when the older boys tested her authority, when the younger children woke crying for their birth mother, when Nathan and Helena had disagreements about how to handle various situations. But through it all, they worked together, supporting each other through the challenges and celebrating the victories. Helena discovered that she had a talent for organization, creating schedules and systems that helped the household run more smoothly. She taught the older children to help with the younger ones, giving each of them age-appropriate responsibilities that made them feel important and valued. She worked with Nathan to repair the ranch, using her inheritance from her mother to hire workers to fix fences and buildings, to buy new stock, to make improvements that helped the ranch become profitable again. Nathan, in turn, taught her to ride better, to understand the cattle business, to see the land the way he did, with love and respect for its harsh beauty. As spring turned to summer and then to fall, the foster family became a cohesive unit. The children thrived under Helena's care, growing stronger and happier. Samuel shot up several inches and started helping Nathan with the adult work on the ranch. Thomas and William became inseparable partners in mischief, always finding new ways to test boundaries while also proving themselves helpful when needed. Mary became Helena's shadow, learning to cook and sew and manage a household. Elizabeth's shy nature bloomed into quiet confidence. Joseph, the 4-year-old, attached himself to Nathan, following his father everywhere with determination. The twins, Ruth and Rachel, were whirlwinds of energy who kept everyone on their toes. James, at 2, started talking in full sentences, usually to tell his siblings what to do. And baby Daniel, now nearly a year old, took his first steps holding Helena's hands while the entire family cheered him on. The relationship between Nathan and Helena deepened as the months passed. They learned each other's rhythms, the way Nathan liked his coffee in the morning, how Helena needed quiet time in the evening to decompress from the chaos of the day. They learned to communicate about the children, about the ranch, about their hopes for the future. And they learned each other's bodies, the physical intimacy between them growing from tentative exploration to passionate connection. Nathan marveled at how Helena could be both strong and soft, fierce and gentle, practical and romantic. Helena discovered that, beneath Nathan's rough exterior, was a man of deep feeling, someone who loved fiercely and completely, who made her feel cherished in ways Thomas never had. It was a cold December evening, nearly a year after their wedding, when Helena realized her monthly courses were late. She sat on the edge of their bed, staring at the calendar, counting and recounting the days. It should not be possible. Dr. Harrison had been clear about the scarring, about her inability to conceive. but her body was telling her something different. And as the days turned into weeks with no bleeding, Helena began to hope and fear in equal measure. She finally told Nathan on Christmas Eve, after the children had hung their stockings and been tucked into bed. They were sitting by the fire, his arm around her shoulders, and she took his hand and placed it on her belly. "Nathan, I think I might be pregnant." He went very still, his eyes searching her face. "But the doctor said it was impossible." She nodded, tears gathering in her eyes. "I know what he said. But I am 6 weeks late, and I have been feeling sick in the mornings, and my breasts are tender. I am afraid to hope, afraid to believe it could be true, but I think it is." Nathan pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. His voice was rough when he spoke. "If it is true, if we are having a baby, that would be a miracle. But Helena, even if you are not pregnant, even if the doctor was right and this is just your body doing something strange, it does not change anything. I love you. The children love you. You are already a mother to 10. One more would be a blessing, but it is not necessary for our happiness." His words released something inside her, and Helena cried against his chest, letting go of the fear that he would be disappointed, that she would be a failure if she was wrong. They sat like that for a long time, holding each other and watching the fire, until finally Helena pulled back and wiped her eyes. "I want to see a doctor to know for certain, but not Dr. Harrison. I do not trust him to be objective." Nathan nodded. "There is a doctor in San Antonio, a woman named Dr. Elizabeth Martin. I have heard she is very skilled, and she specializes in women's health. We can go see her after the new year." The trip to San Antonio in early January was both exciting and terrifying. They left the children with Aunt Margaret, who had moved into the ranch house to help during the busy seasons and had become an indispensable part of their family. The journey took 2 days by train, and Helena spent most of it alternating between hope and dread. Nathan held her hand the entire way, his steady presence anchoring her when her emotions threatened to overwhelm her. Dr. Elizabeth Martin was a tall woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner. She examined Helena thoroughly, asking questions about her medical history, her symptoms, the fever that had caused the scarring. When she was done, she sat behind her desk and folded her hands, looking at Helena and Nathan with a serious expression. "Miss Reynolds, or I should say Mrs. Foster, you are indeed pregnant. About 8 weeks along, I would estimate." Helena's hand flew to her mouth, a sob escaping before she could stop it. Nathan's arm came around her immediately, his own eyes bright with unshed tears. "But how?" Helena managed to ask. "Dr. Harrison said the scarring made it impossible." Dr. Martin's expression softened. "The human body is remarkably resilient, Mrs. Foster. Sometimes, scarring can diminish over time, especially if there was not infection involved. It is also possible that Dr. Harrison overestimated the extent of the damage. While your fertility is certainly compromised, clearly not impossible. I will not lie to you. This will be considered a high-risk pregnancy given your history. You will need to be careful, avoid heavy lifting, and see a doctor regularly. But there is no reason to think you cannot carry this baby to term." They stayed in San Antonio for another day, walking through the city in a daze, holding hands like newlyweds and marveling at the miracle they had been given. Nathan kept touching her belly, even though there was nothing to feel yet, and Helena found herself crying at random moments, overcome with joy and gratitude. When they returned to the ranch, they gathered all the children and told them the news. The reaction was everything Helena could have hoped for. The girls screamed with excitement, the boys whooped and hollered, and Samuel picked Helena up and spun her around before Nathan growled at him to be careful. Baby Daniel, now walking and babbling constantly, seemed confused by all the excitement but clapped his hands along with everyone else. The pregnancy progressed smoothly, despite Dr. Martin's warnings. Helena was careful to follow all the instructions, letting the older children take on more responsibilities and accepting help when it was offered. Nathan hovered like a worried hen, constantly asking if she was feeling well, if she needed to rest, if she should be doing whatever task she had taken on. It drove Helena a little crazy, but she also loved him for it, for the way he cared for her and their coming child. As her belly grew, the children became fascinated with the baby. They would take turns talking to Helena's stomach, telling the baby about the ranch, about the animals, about all the siblings who were waiting to meet them. Mary started knitting tiny booties, her stitches careful and even. Elizabeth collected soft fabrics to make blankets. The boys built a new cradle under Nathan's supervision, working together to create something beautiful and sturdy. Even Joseph and the twins participated, gathering wildflowers to decorate the nursery and singing songs they claimed would help the baby know their voices. On a warm evening in late July, Helena went into labor. Nathan sent Samuel racing for Dr. Martin, who had agreed to come to the ranch for the birth, while he helped Helena to their bedroom. The children were sent to stay with Aunt Margaret in her rooms, though they kept sneaking out to check on Helena, until Samuel stationed himself as a guard, promising to tell them the moment the baby arrived. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day. Dr. Martin stayed by Helena's side the entire time, monitoring her carefully, and Nathan never left her, holding her hand and whispering encouragement even when she screamed at him that this was his fault. Finally, as the sun was setting on the second day, Helena gave one final push and a baby's cry filled the room. "It is a boy," Dr. Martin announced, holding up the squalling infant. "A healthy, perfect boy." She placed the baby on Helena's chest, and Helena looked down at her son with wonder. He had dark hair like Nathan and a red, angry face that made her laugh through her tears. Nathan leaned over them both, his own face wet with tears, and kissed first Helena and then his new son. "You did it," he whispered. "You are amazing. I love you so much." After Helena and the baby had been cleaned up and declared healthy, the children were allowed in to meet their new brother. They crowded around the bed, eyes wide with awe, staring at the tiny infant in Helena's arms. "What are you going to name him?" Mary asked, reaching out to touch the baby's tiny hand. Helena looked at Nathan and they shared a smile. They had discussed names endlessly over the past months, unable to agree on anything. But looking at her son now, Helena knew exactly what he should be called. "His name is Hope," she said softly. "Hope Nathan Foster, because he represents hope for our future, hope that miracles can happen, hope that love can heal even the deepest wounds." Nathan's throat worked, and he nodded, unable to speak. The children murmured approval, taking turns holding baby Hope under Helena's watchful eye. As she watched her family, all 11 of her children surrounding her with Nathan at her side, Helena felt a completeness she had never imagined possible. She thought about that day in her father's parlor when Dr. Harrison had destroyed her future, about Thomas walking away, about the woman she had been who thought her life was over. That woman seemed like a stranger now. The years that followed were full of joy and struggle in equal measure. Hope grew into a bright, energetic toddler who kept up with his older siblings, despite being the youngest. The ranch prospered under Nathan and Helena's combined management, growing to become one of the most successful in the region. Samuel grew into a fine young man who took on more responsibility with the cattle, and eventually married a sweet girl from town, building a house on the northern part of the property. Thomas and William both showed talent with horses, starting a breeding and training operation that brought in additional income. Mary became a teacher at the local school, but still lived at home, helping Helena manage the household. 2 years after Hope was born, Helena found herself pregnant again, another miracle that brought a daughter they named Grace into the family. And 3 years after that, she had twins, 2 boys they named Faith and Chance. Dr. Martin supervised all 3 pregnancies, marveling each time at Helena's body's ability to conceive despite the odds. Nathan joked that his wife was the most infertile woman in Texas, and Helena would laugh and swat at him while holding whichever baby was newest. By the time Helena was 35, she had mothered 14 children, 11 who had called her mama from the start, and 3 who had grown in her own body. The original 10 foster children were growing up, some already starting families of their own, but they all remained close, treating the ranch as home base no matter where life took them. The younger children grew up knowing only Helena as their mother, surrounded by siblings who adored them. On their 15th wedding anniversary, Nathan and Helena stood on that same porch where they had spent their wedding night, watching the sun set over land that had become truly theirs through hard work and love. His arms were around her, her head resting on his shoulder, and they stood in comfortable silence for a long moment. "You ever regret it?" Nathan asked quietly. "Choosing this life, this crazy, chaotic, exhausting life?" Helena turned in his arms and looked up at him, seeing the man she had fallen in love with, older now with gray threading through his dark hair, lines around his eyes from sun and laughter, but still the same man who had offered her purpose when she needed it most. "Never," she said firmly. "Not for a single moment. You and our children are the best things that ever happened to me. I would choose this life 1,000 times over." Nathan kissed her then, deep and slow and full of the love that had sustained them through 15 years of marriage. When they finally pulled apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "I was broken when you came into my life, Helena, drowning under the weight of trying to be everything my children needed while grieving Mary. You saved us. You brought light back into this house, love back into our lives. You took my 10 children and loved them like they were your own, never asking for anything in return except the chance to be their mother. And then, you gave me 3 more miracles I never expected. You are the strongest, most amazing woman I have ever known, and I fall more in love with you every single day." Helena felt tears gather in her eyes, but they were happy tears, the kind she had shed so often over the years that her children teased her about being a leaky faucet. "I love you too, Nathan Foster. Thank you for seeing past what I could not give you and valuing what I could. Thank you for your children, for our children, for this beautiful, messy, perfect life we have built together." Inside the house, they could hear the sounds of their family, the older children who had come for the anniversary celebration, the younger ones getting ready for bed, baby Chance crying for his evening feeding. The sounds that had once overwhelmed Nathan now felt like music, like home, and he knew he owed it all to the woman in his arms. As they walked back inside together, ready to rejoin the chaos and love of their enormous family, both of them felt the deep satisfaction of a life well lived, of love that had triumphed over loss, of a family built not just on blood but on choice and commitment, and the kind of love that endures through everything. The ranch continued to thrive over the following decades, becoming a gathering place for the Foster family that kept expanding as children married and had children of their own. Helena became known throughout the region not just as Nathan Foster's wife, but as a woman of strength and wisdom in her own right. Young women facing their own struggles would come to her for advice, and she never turned anyone away, always offering a listening ear and the hard-won wisdom of someone who had survived her own darkest moments. She stayed close with Aunt Margaret until her aunt passed away peacefully at the age of 78, surrounded by the family she had helped create. Helena grieved deeply for the woman who had given her a second chance at life, but she also celebrated her aunt's legacy, the way she had shown that strength and femininity were not opposites, that a woman could be both tough and tender. As Nathan and Helena grew older together, they never lost the connection that had formed in those early days when she had walked into his chaotic household and decided to stay. They had weathered storms, both literal and metaphorical, droughts that threatened the cattle, illnesses that scared them, the normal struggles of raising children in a hard land during difficult times. But through it all, they had each other, and that had made all the difference. On their 30th anniversary, when Helena was 48 and Nathan was 55, they renewed their vows in front of their entire family. All 14 of their children were there, along with their spouses and the growing number of grandchildren. Samuel, now 38 with children of his own, stood up to make a speech that had everyone in tears. "My mother died when I was 12, he said, his voice thick with emotion. "And I thought our family was broken beyond repair." Then Miss Helena came into our lives, and she did not try to replace our mother or make us forget her. Instead, she loved us exactly as we were, with all our grief and anger and fear. She became our mother not through biology but through choice, every single day choosing to stay, choosing to love us, choosing to build a life with our Father. She taught us that family is not just about blood. It is about commitment and love and showing up even when things are hard. Everything good in my life I owe to the example she and Pa set for us. Helena wept openly as her oldest son spoke, and when he finished, she stood and hugged him tightly. This man who had been a struggling 12-year-old boy when she met him, who was now a husband and father himself. One by one, her children came up to embrace her and Nathan, sharing memories and gratitude, creating a moment of connection that would sustain the family through whatever challenges lay ahead. Nathan watched his wife surrounded by their children and grandchildren, and he felt a profound sense of gratitude for the twist of fate that had brought her to him. She was gray now, her face lined with the marks of a life well lived, but to him she was as beautiful as the day he had first seen her climbing down from Aunt Margaret's wagon. She had taken his broken family and made it whole, had loved his children without reservation, and had given him 3 more miracles besides. More than that, she had given him herself, her strength, her wisdom, her unwavering love. As the celebration wound down and the extended family began to depart, the original 10 foster children lingered, along with Hope, Grace, Faith, and Chance. They sat together in the living room where so many important moments had happened, and Mary, now 37 and the mother of 4, spoke up. "Mama, Pa, we wanted to do something special for your anniversary. We have all been talking, and we want you to know that you have given us the greatest gift possible. You showed us what real love looks like, what commitment means, how to build a family on a foundation of respect and care. We are who we are because of you both." Elizabeth, 36 and as quiet as ever, added, "You saved us, Mama. When you came into our lives, we were drowning in grief and chaos. You brought order and love and made us believe that we could be happy again. We want to make sure you know that we see everything you have done for us, that we appreciate every sacrifice, every moment of patience, every expression of love." The twins, Ruth and Rachel, now 33 and still as inseparable as ever, presented Helena with a quilt they had made together, each square representing a memory from their lives, images of the ranch, the children at various ages, important moments stitched in fabric and thread. Helena ran her fingers over the squares, tears streaming down her face as she saw their lives represented in cloth and color. Hope, now 27 and preparing to take over the ranch management from Nathan, stood with his younger siblings Grace, Faith, and Chance, now 25, 22, and 22 respectively. Pa, Mama, we might be the youngest, but we want you to know that we see how our older siblings look at you, the respect and love they have. Growing up, we heard the stories about how Mama came into the family, how she chose all of us when the world had told her she could not have children of her own. You taught us that miracles happen, that love is stronger than biology, that family is what you make it. Nathan stood and pulled Helena up with him, wrapping his arm around her waist. His voice was rough when he spoke. Your mother and I are the lucky ones. Yes, we worked hard. Yes, we made sacrifices. But what we got in return is beyond anything we could have imagined. You are all proof that love multiplies rather than divides, that there is always room for one more person in a heart that is open. We are so proud of who you have all become, and we are grateful every single day that we get to be your parents. Helena nodded, unable to speak through her tears, and her children surrounded them again. A group embrace that included everyone, 3 generations of Fosters connected by bonds that transcended blood. In that moment, Helena thought back to the woman she had been at 23, sitting in her father's parlor and believing her life was over. She could never have imagined this future, this abundant life full of love and purpose and joy. The doctor had been wrong about so many things, but most of all, he had been wrong that her inability to conceive meant she could not be a mother. She had become a mother to 10 children who desperately needed one, and in doing so, had found her own healing and purpose. The fact that her body had eventually blessed her with 3 more children was wonderful, but it was not what defined her motherhood. What defined it was the daily choice to love, to stay, to show up even when things were hard, to put the needs of her children ahead of her own comfort, to build a life and a family with the man she loved. As the evening grew late, and the children finally left to go to their own homes, or to the bedrooms they still kept in the big house, Nathan and Helena prepared for bed in the room they had shared for 30 years. Helena sat at her dressing table, brushing out her long gray hair, and watched Nathan in the mirror as he moved around the room. He caught her looking and smiled, crossing to stand behind her, his hands resting on her shoulders. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, meeting her eyes in the mirror. She covered his hands with her own and smiled. "I am thinking about how Thomas Whitmore did me the biggest favor of my life when he broke our engagement. I am thinking about how the worst day of my life led directly to the best decision I ever made. I am thinking about how grateful I am for every moment of this life we have built together, for every child who calls me Mama, for every challenge we have overcome side by side." Nathan leaned down and kissed the top of her head. "I am thinking similar thoughts. When Mary died, I thought I would never be happy again, that I would spend the rest of my life just trying to survive and keep my children fed and clothed. Then you walked into my kitchen and started washing dishes like you belonged there, and something shifted. You gave me hope when I had none, love when I thought I was too broken to receive it, a partner when I thought I would always be alone. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Helena Foster." She stood and turned into his arms, tilting her face up for his kiss. Even after 30 years, the feel of his lips on hers still made her heart race, still made her feel cherished and desired. When they finally pulled apart, she rested her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "I love you, Nathan. Today, tomorrow, always. Thank you for choosing me, for seeing past my limitations to my strengths, for giving me the family I thought I could never have. I love you too, Helena, forever and always. You are my miracle, my gift, my everything." They stood like that for a long moment, two people who had found each other in the wreckage of their separate griefs and built something beautiful together. When they finally climbed into bed, they fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, content in the knowledge that they had lived well, loved deeply, and created a legacy that would endure for generations. The years continued to pass, bringing the joys and sorrows that come with a long life. Nathan passed away peacefully at the age of 72, surrounded by his wife and children, having lived to see not only his grandchildren but many of his great-grandchildren as well. Helena grieved him deeply, but she was sustained through her loss by the family they had built together, by the children who rallied around her with the same fierce love she had always shown them. She lived another 15 years as a widow, remaining on the ranch that Hope managed with skill and dedication. She spent her days surrounded by family, watching the legacy she and Nathan had created continue to grow and thrive. She told stories to her great-great-grandchildren about their great-grandfather Nathan, about the early days when she had come to a house full of chaos and chosen to stay, about the love that had sustained them through decades of marriage. When Helena Reynolds Foster passed away at the age of 87, she was surrounded by 4 generations of the family she had helped create. Her children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and even a few great-great-grandchildren filled the house, all of them there to say goodbye to the woman who had shown them what it meant to love without limits. At her funeral, held at the ranch she had called home for 64 years, each of the original 10 foster children spoke about what she had meant to them, how she had changed their lives, how her legacy would continue through them and their descendants. Samuel, now 82 and the last surviving member of his generation, spoke with a voice that wavered but remained strong. "My stepmother was told she could never have children. And then she became mother to 10, and gave birth to 3 more, and mothered countless others through her wisdom and love. She taught us that limitations are often just challenges waiting to be overcome, that love is not defined by biology, that family is something you build through choice and commitment. She lived a life of purpose and passion, and we are all better for having known her. The world has lost a remarkable woman, but her legacy will live on in every person she touched, in every life she changed, in every example of love she showed us." Helena Reynolds Foster was buried next to Nathan on a hill overlooking the ranch they had built together, under a sky as wide and blue as the love they had shared. Her gravestone reads simply, "Beloved wife, mother to 14, grandmother, great-grandmother, and great-great-grandmother. She loved without limits and lived without regrets. Her legacy is love." And it was true. In the end, Helena's life was defined not by what she could not do, but by what she had chosen to do. She had taken rejection and turned it into purpose, had taken broken dreams and built new ones, had taken a cowboy's words, "Good, I already have 10 who need a mother," and turned them into a lifetime of love. She had proven that sometimes the greatest gifts come wrapped in the packaging of our deepest disappointments, that miracles happen when we least expect them, and that love, real love, transcends every limitation we think defines us. The Foster Ranch continued to thrive for generations after Helena's death, always remaining in the family, always serving as a gathering place where the descendants of those original 10 children plus 3 came together to remember where they came from and to celebrate the love that had made it all possible. And every child born into that family learned the story of Helena Reynolds, the woman who could not have children but became mother to 14, who was rejected for her limitations but chosen for her strengths, who proved that family is not about blood but about love, commitment, and the daily choice to show up and be present for the people who need you most. Her story became legend in the family, passed down through generations as an example of resilience, love, and the power of second chances. And somewhere, in whatever place souls go after death, Nathan and Helena were together again, watching over the family they had created, satisfied with a life well lived and a love that had transcended every obstacle, proving that sometimes the cowboy who says, "Good, I already have 10 who need a mother," is really saying, "I see your worth beyond what you think defines you, and I am offering you a chance to build something beautiful from the ashes of your broken dreams." And Helena had taken that chance and turned it into a legacy of love that would endure forever.